Hello to Andrew, and I'm going to start
Morning,
off.
Pete.
Hiya, just start off with a quick introduction, if I can. Andrew served with the Royal Air Force for 26 years, I believe, in
Yeah,
intelligence. Since then, he has been a battlefield guide, taking students to Western Front, Normandy, Berlin. Not at the moment, though. I shouldn't think that's all.
sadly not.
That's all on hold. And a few years ago, Andrew approached me in regard to his first book, Fire Step to Fokker Fodder, which was a pleasure to be able to publish. And then as a follow-up to that, with his second book, he has been working on, and we have now published Extremes of Fortune, which is the story of Herbert Massey. So, Andrew, this is sort of like a bit of a weird lockdown launch, because normally we'd be doing this at an air show, but unfortunately
Yeah.
we can't do that at the moment. How was it that you came about to write Extremes of Fortune?
Well, I mean, it all really came from the first book. Fire Step to Fokker Fodder was based on the diaries of Jack Lidsey, who was a First World War aviator who was shot down and killed by the Red Baron. And while I was writing that book, obviously, Lidsey wrote about in his diary many other people that he served and flew with. And I decided just to check out a few of the stories, who lived, who died, what happened to them. And Herbert Martin Massey's story really was the standout one. The more I read about him, just, the more remarkable, the more amazing his story became. And that just, naturally became the subject of my second book.
So can you give us a brief description of how much you cover in the book in respect to Massey's career?
Yeah, it covers his whole life from birth to death. I mean, he lived until he was 78. But obviously, the main parts of the book cover his military career, which is remarkable. He served in 3 different conflicts. He was a teenager pilot during the First World War, winning the Military Cross. He then goes into the 1930s with the Royal Air Force to the Palestine Emergency in 1936, where he is severely wounded for the second time. I should have said, back in the First World War, he was shot down and horrendously burned, life-threatening injuries, which he managed to overcome. So 1936, he's shot again while flying. And then in 1942, the Second World War, his third conflict, he's shot down over Holland and taken prisoner by the Germans. So it's just an incredible military career to cover 3 conflicts and wounded 3 times as well.
Yeah, and that's why it's called Extremes of Fortune.
Certainly
The book,
is, yeah.
and that's what we've got on the cover here. The bullet. That's the bullet
Yeah,
hole, isn't it?
that's the cigarette case that he just fortuitously happened to be carrying in the top left-hand pocket of his flying jacket in Palestine in 1936. One round fired from the Arab rebels on the ground went through the fabric covering of his aircraft, a Hawker Hart, and hit him in the left knee, sort of shatters his knee, and he's bleeding profusely. But the second round hits that cigarette case, which is the bullet hole that you see in the picture, and stops the round going into his chest and probably into his heart.
And that's in possession of the family, the Massey family at the moment, who've been
Yeah.
extremely supportive of the whole project.
Well, without the family support, the book really wouldn't have gone ahead. I contacted them when I first wanted to write the story just to get their agreement. And then last summer, I was able to go down and visit Massey's daughter-in-law. And on the way down in the car, I was thinking, well, I'll just go and see what she's got, see if there's anything worth having a look at. And it was an absolute treasure trove of ephemera and artifacts. And basically, every piece of paperwork about Martin Massey, going right back to his junior school reports when he was 9 years old, have been kept. So the whole of his life is there, recorded by the family. It was just absolutely amazing to sit and go through that wonderful collection.
And we've got 32 pages of plate sections in there with lots of previously unpublished photographs and some of those documents. So having written the book and studied, I mean, what are your views on the man? Martin.
He's a remarkable man. I mean, I think hero is an overused word these days, but in Massey's case, I believe it to be true. As I say, going back to his First World War experience, he was horrendously burned from the waist down. He was assessed as 100% totally disabled, and yet within 4 years of those injuries, he was not only walking again, but flying again, and also playing rugby for the Royal Air Force. To go from 100% totally disabled to that shows immense determination on his part. And then sort of on into the Second World War, when he's shot down and taken prisoner, he goes to Stalag Luft 3 at Sargon, where, because he's a group captain, he becomes the senior British officer. He authorises the Great Escape. So, the subsequent murders of the 50 who were killed is really on his shoulders, on his conscience. And through all of those episodes, his compassion, his humanity for the people he led, the people that he was in charge of, just shines through. He really was a remarkable man. And I say it in the book, if anybody is the personification of the RAF motto, per ardua ad astra, through adversity to the stars, I think it's Martin Massey.
Yes, one of the documents that was in his archives was this thin paper where he'd written everybody's these addresses, hadn't he? Which we've included as part of the cover design. Just a bit of background to that bit of paper.
Yeah, Massey, because of his injuries when he was at Sargon, he'd been injured again when he was shot down in 1942. The extent of his injuries meant that he was eligible for repatriation. And almost immediately after the Great Escape, when he'd been told by the Germans about the murders of the 50, bizarrely, the Germans said, right, you can go home now because of your injuries. So he brings home the story of the murders, and it's his testimony that really starts the post-war investigation and subsequent trials of those who were guilty of the war crimes. But that little notebook you were just talking about there is written on cigarette paper, and the pages are only about 2 inches high. But again, the family have this, and it's remarkable to see. He'd written this little notebook out of all names and addresses of relatives of other prisoners at Sargon, who he said when he was leaving to be repatriated, when I get home, I will go and visit your relatives and tell them that you're okay and tell them how you are. For those that he couldn't visit in sort of far-flung places, then he wrote instead. And one of the former prisoners said, after the war, when he found out what Massey had done, he said he was absolutely amazed by this and really bowled over that he'd come home, he'd got really nothing more to do, I suppose, in the prisoner of war camp anymore. Yet he kept his promise, wrote or visited to all those relatives just to bring some reassurance to loved ones.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a terrific addition to the story of the Royal Air Force. Herbert Martin Massey's story most definitely needs to be told, and it's very much filled that gap, Andrew. So congratulations on that. Signed copies of the book are available on the Fighting High website, as are signed copies of Andrew's first book, Fire Step to Fokker Fodder. And hopefully, at some point this year, we may get to an air show where we'll be able to meet people and do some signings of the books, but we do have some signed copies. So thank you, Andrew. And again, congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.